Thank you for joining me for another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum, where all voices matter. Earlier this year, an Ontario task force reviewing the Ontario Securities Act and capital markets made a series of sweeping recommendations for modernization. Joining us to discuss is the chairperson of the task force, Walied Soliman, who also serves as the Canadian chair of Norton Rose Fulbright, a law firm in Toronto. Welcome back to help us understand your latest work, Walied.
Thank you very much, Tony. Glad to be here.
First of all, maybe just describe the genesis of this task force. What was the problem that the government was trying to resolve or fix?
Well, Tony, as you know, the capital markets play a very important role in our economy. And believe it or not, the capital markets in Ontario had not gone through any sort of comprehensive review since 2003. There was a report done at that time by Purdy Crawford. It was a process that was started under Ernie Eves and when he was premier. And since then, there has been absolutely no comprehensive review done of our capital markets regime here in Ontario. Premier Ford and at the time Minister Phillips recognized that this is a major omission in our regulatory framework. This was really sort of pre-COVID. It was a feeling that, look, we are in a hyper-competitive global environment, and that it was absolutely critical that we're in a position where Ontario, as the engine of the capital markets of Canada, had the most robust technology in place from a regulatory perspective. So that was sort of the genesis of it. It was quite visionary. And then it took on some real added importance once COVID came along.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask about that. So that had an impact.
Yeah. Well, it was really remarkable, Tony, because, we were just sort of getting going. We had about 4 or 5 in-person meetings when we were all sent home in the middle of March last year. And I remember speaking with Minister Phillips and folks in Premier Ford's office, and I said, should we put the thing on pause? Should we push it out? And the answer was quite visionary. It was, no, we actually want you to accelerate your work. We want you to get it done during COVID, because when we come out of this, we want to be in the absolute best position we possibly can be from a globally competitive perspective.
So very interesting that is visionary and forward-looking, I got to say, because most people would just sort of hunker down. So you did obviously some consultations. What were the stakeholders telling you?
So stakeholders were mainly telling us that they were relieved that a government had put this on the agenda. As you know, Tony, your former colleague, may God bless his soul, Jim Flaherty, was really the last politician that put the capital markets on the public agenda at all, when he famously tried to establish a national securities regulator. But capital markets is not a sexy electoral issue. Reforming the capital markets or making changes to the capital markets doesn't appear in any political party's platform, whether it's in Ontario, federally, or any part of the country. So the first thing we heard was really relief. The second thing that we heard was people reminding us what the purposes of capital markets laws are. And we really were guided by this as we were moving forward. And those purposes are wealth creation, the efficient capability for people like me and you, Tony, to participate through our RRSPs or through direct investments in an organized fashion where we can grow our wealth in this country. And the second one is job creation. When we have an efficient capital markets in this province, new companies find it easier to set themselves up, hire people, set up head offices, get listed, traded, grow. Some of the great examples of the last 10 years, like Shopify, growing in Ottawa and becoming one of the largest employers in the region and one of Canada's most valuable public companies. That's a great success
Sure.
story. And the question was really, how is it that we can do more of that while keeping true to those important principles?
Walied, we just got over a little bit about what you were hearing from people. Now, just kind of walk us through some of your recommendations, the important ones that I think are striking.
Well, Tony, we made 74 recommendations, and I'm proud of each and every single one of them. But I'll tell you some of them that I think, just maybe a quick overview.
Sure.
We, as a starting point, talked about reforming the mandate of the Ontario Securities Commission. The mandate of the Ontario Securities Commission today is really to be a police officer. And we wanted the Ontario Securities Commission to also play a role in the growth of the capital markets in Ontario. And so we proposed to supplant the existing mandate with a new mandate that would supplement the all-important investor protection mandate with a capital markets growth mandate. And we're very, very excited about that. We're very pleased about that. And in fact, Minister Bethlen Falvey has announced that that is going to be, in fact, it's part of the budget legislation that was announced just a few weeks ago. We then took a look at the OSC itself. So we started with the mandate, then went to the OSC and tried to focus on how we could make the governance and machinery of that organization better. Currently, unlike what's recommended to the public companies it regulates, the chair of the OSC also acts as its CEO, a big no-no in public markets. And so we are separating the chair and governance functions, or the CEO and governance functions of the OSC. And we are also separating the adjudicative and prosecutorial functions of the OSC. Right now, they're all sort of blended together. It worked, almost 100 years ago when we had our first securities legislation in Ontario. It doesn't work now. And so we looked at that from a governance perspective. We then really sort of focused on a number of areas that would make the establishment of a public company in Ontario a lot easier, and the continued growth of a public company in Ontario easier. And we made a whole slew of recommendations around that. We made a whole slew of recommendations around intermediaries and strengthening intermediaries in Ontario. So much like you use a real estate agent to buy or sell a home, you use investment banks to buy and sell companies and help them raise capital.
Sure.
There has been a significant decrease in the number of intermediaries that focus on the mid-market, which is the largest growth area of the capital markets in Ontario. So we've added a bunch of programs that we think will increase the number of intermediaries and strengthen the number of intermediaries focused on that mid-market. Finally, we have really focused on refining the interactions between the public and the Securities Commission. So really focused on getting the folks who are behaving badly in trouble quicker, and folks that are maybe under investigation but haven't conducted a real, anything really that bad, not ruining their lives through the investigation process.
Okay.
So that's a very broadly the fastest briefing, Tony, that I've given anybody on the 74 recommendations has been an hour and a half. It was poor Peter Bethlen Falvey when he first became the Minister of Finance. I just plowed through it, and I don't think I even had a sip of water. But that's it for you in less than 5 minutes.
That's good, and I think our viewers appreciate the 5-minute version versus the hour and a half or 2 hours that the finance minister had to endure. We've got less than a minute, so this might jump over after the break. But tell us a little bit about the formal response of the Ontario government.
Oh, it's been fabulous. I'll start with a an emotive part and maybe move to the more substantive part after your break. There has never been a Minister of Finance in Ontario that has tackled the capital markets as quickly and decisively as Peter Bethlenfalvy has. I'm very proud of him. He came into this role in January, and by March had a comprehensive framework in the budget on the task force's work. He did multiple briefings, and I just tell stakeholders that there's no Minister of Finance that would have spent that much time in the first 3 months of their term on the capital markets, and I think it's something we should be thankful for. And I look forward to telling you a little bit about the substantive changes.
Indeed, we will right after this break, so please stay with us. Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Walied Soliman, discussing the modernization agenda for Ontario's capital markets. Walied, again, Ontario government response. Obviously, Peter Bethlenfalvy, the finance minister, you said, was excited, put things in motion in the Ontario budget. Give us a little bit more detail on the substance there.
Well, it was quite sweeping, and I think it actually caught a lot of folks surprised and a little bit off guard. The capital markets have gotten used to false starts with provincial governments, and Premier Ford and Minister Bethlenfalvy, and really the incredible efforts of Minister Phillips over the previous year just did an incredible job of making sure that this became a reality. So let me tell you what was announced in the budget. Number one, the mandate changes that we've proposed are going to become law in Ontario. Number two, the governance changes to the OSC are going to become law in Ontario. Number three, a number of specific recommendations relating to environment, social, and governance responsibilities of issuers are going to become the law in Ontario.
So there's going to be an ISG obligation?
ESG, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
ESG, yes, sorry, yeah.
A number of ESG obligations are coming in. In fact, Minister Bethlenfalvy dedicated a section in his budget speech actually on the importance of ESG. Number four, we are going to be, the minister has asked the Ministry of Finance to accept our recommendation of establishing a whole new Capital Markets Act to replace the existing Securities Act and to bring in the legislative recommendations that we made into that Capital Markets Act. We expect to see a first draft of that act sometime in the next month, Tony, and the minister has set a very aggressive agenda on having that Capital Markets Act adopted into law over the coming months. Finally, the minister has asked the Ontario Securities Commission to undertake its formal consultation process. There's a legislatively required consultation process on all of the regulatory changes that we have proposed. And the budget indicated that they're looking for sort of responses on that over the coming 8 to 12 months. So very comprehensive. I couldn't be happier, couldn't be more pleased. And I think that this government ought to be across the board. It doesn't matter if you're a liberal or conservative. These are good things. This wasn't a liberal or conservative document. We're trying to improve the capital markets. People should be very thankful and encouraging of what this government has done on this file.
And indeed, the Ontario Securities Commission would be known as the Ontario Capital Markets Commission. Have I got that right?
That particular, so we did make a recommendation on change of name. We wanted to call it the Capital Markets Authority of Ontario. Right. I'm not sure that that'll be adopted. Okay. There is a thought that in this time where fiscal restraint is the order of the day, it is actually quite remarkable how expensive it is. Indeed. To change the name of it. I mean, you have this experience, Tony. I was surprised to learn how expensive it is to change it. And my own input was, we think it's the right thing. It should be called the Capital Markets Act Authority. But if it's going to cost $25 million, I couldn't live with myself making that
Yeah.
recommendation or pushing it for sure.
Well, it took the Law Society of Upper Canada 150 years to become the Law Society of Ontario, so maybe a bit further down the line. We've just got over a minute before our next break, but is the dream of an integrated national securities regulator, is that dead? You talked about Jim
So sad.
Flaherty,
So
and
sad to
it's
say that
not
to you, Tony.
happening, eh?
So sad.
Yeah.
You know, we knew during the past year that it was dying, and it saddened me greatly, and I'm sure it saddens you, Tony. Our very good friend, um, Jim Flaherty had an incredible vision, and it was the right vision, and it continues to be the right vision. But it's going to take some real political will, and it's going to take some political stars to align. And
Mm.
let's just be blunt: the Liberals are not going to push this with Quebec offside, and the Conservatives aren't going to push this with Alberta offside. And so,
Mm.
pretty much for now, it's unfortunately, sadly, dead.
Well, we can, at least in Ontario, because it is the primary securities forum, let's face it, can at least lead the way on some of these changes. We are going to come back after the break for our final segment with Walied Soliman talking about Ontario and indeed national capital markets. We'll be back. And we're back here at Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Walied Soliman. Of course, he is Canadian chair of Norton Rose Fulbright, but we're asking him to be on the program in his capacity, chairing the modernization of Ontario capital markets. Walied, obviously, you made all of those 70 plus recommendations, but you now kind of have a window into the broader issues of capital raising and innovation and competitiveness in Ontario and indeed Canada. Do you have any thoughts on the broader issues that sort of flow from your report but might be beyond your report?
I do actually, I've tried to speak about this with as many industry associations and other participants in the capital markets as I can. I believe that the capital markets and the strength of the capital markets is going to be integral to us coming out of this COVID period. As a nation, we've got lots of problems. The amount of debt and the deficit that we're incurring at both the provincial and federal levels, the threatening of our social contract really sort of coming apart, and it doesn't take you to be a real crystal ball futurist to see that that's only going to get more difficult. And so the capital markets have a very important role in making sure that there is capital that comes into this country is easily accessible to entrepreneurs, and that entrepreneurs decide that they want to stay here in this province and in this country to build new headquarters and build hopefully another 20 Shopifys.
Mm.
How are we going to get there? And this is what I think is very important. One of the things that saddened me, Tony, you've been doing public policy for a large part of your career. This is my first time actually doing public policy as opposed to just politics. And one of the things that saddened me was the number of stakeholders who spent more time sort of just talking up their book
Yeah,
as opposed
yeah.
to really focusing on what could take this country to the next level. And I think there's a time for lobbying and talking up your book in public policy.
Sure.
This is not the time when it comes to the capital markets. We have to do what's right. We have an incredible opportunity in Premier Ford and Minister Bethlen Falvey, who've decided to use some of their political capital and some of their legislative time to drive this forward. Let's not waste it as an industry by talking up silly interests that are not going to strengthen the capital markets, but may honestly put an extra 25 grand in some guy's bonus pool. And what a shame if we use our efforts focusing on that as opposed to something so important for the future of the country.
And your earlier point, of course, was, we're in this economic calamity called COVID, and here's a chance to get out when we do get out of COVID to relaunch the Ontario and the Canadian economy. If we don't have the right basis for our capital markets, all of that could be for naught.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Tony. And there's going to be, exceptional limits as to what the government can do. Tony, you've heard about a number of programs where governments have tried to set up private equity funds to invest in startups. It never works.
I did
We
that.
know
I
it.
did that as industry minister. I
Right.
don't.
And it's
Yeah.
so hard for these things to succeed.
Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
best way for them to
Best
work is for
way.
the market to do their
Market.
business.
Yeah. Absolutely. Final thoughts. Do you see Ontario once this is passed, assuming it does get passed by the Ontario legislature? You see a quick ramp up.
I do. I think we're going to see significant changes in the next 12 to 18 months. I'm hoping that these changes will all be done before the next provincial election. And again, looking for as much stakeholder support as we could possibly get.
Walied Soliman, it's been a pleasure to have you back on the program. We had you first on doing a Legal Beagle panel, and now to have you on chairing the capital markets reform and hearing your point of view. It's been our pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Tony, and congrats to all your success on this show.
Thank you. The modernization of Ontario capital markets is a national story. Obviously, Ontario's capital markets are the largest in the land, and certainly if they are not working properly or not working innovatively, we all suffer in terms of job losses or things that are the opportunities that are not there for our country. So I'm glad to see that these are being taken seriously by the Ontario government, and we'll be obviously monitoring it in the future as well. Thanks for watching.